Hello, Read 585, and welcome to week 11. This week we begin a new unit which is focused on the literacy coach as grant writer. And this is actually a new unit and a new week of content for us. So I'm pretty excited to preview this with you. We just wrapped up our learning on the literacy coach as teacher or one who provides professional learning and support. And we're just going to spend a quick 1 week on professional publication and grant writing before we move on to the role of the literacy coach as instructional coach. So I think I alluded to this in the past, but students last semester really wanted more information on grant writing. And as we've learned from chapter 1 of Walpole and McKenna, that is one of the many hats that the literacy specialist coach wears. And you also raised some questions about, how do I get started with grant writing? So I have been busy preparing content for this week from a variety of sources. So hopefully you find it useful. So let's go over a few logistics for the week to start. So we're doing something a little bit different. While I have written a number of grant applications and have had a lot of things successfully funded and others rejected, I am not the end-all be-all on grant writing. And for that reason, I'm going to have you actually look to some other content on grant writing. So I reached out to Sarah Paramore, who is at Pollock Library, and she is actually designated as our library support person for the Read department. You might recall I sent out an email earlier in this semester with her contact information. Well, I reached out to her. I don't love what this is doing. I guess this will give you the idea. But I reached out to her and asked her for her help in getting some resources together for all of you. So what she did is made this site for our course. And if you go to the grant writing tab, you'll see all of the awesome tools she created. Well, over here in this left column, she has tutorials. So the one that's embedded here is just a little preview of this grant writing tutorial on lynda.com, which I have access to, but I don't know if you do as a non-faculty member. They do offer a free trial, so you may want to sign up for the free trial, and then you can access a number of professional learning opportunities. This Pearson grant tutorial is awesome. Everyone has access to that. And then here's an NEA grant tutorial. This is a video. This requires you to read and click through things, not as engaging. I would recommend this one, but I would like for you to take a look at these tutorials in lieu of me lecturing on grant writing, because I have some experience I will share, but then really want you, Pearson reviews so many grant applications. They're just a much better source to get information from. Also here, she has general grant writing books that you may want to check out from the library or find, as well as helpful articles here. And these are some of the ones that are assigned for readings this week, as well as others. And then here are additional grant resources and links. So be sure and watch a tutorial in regard to content for the week, and then look at all the other great resources there that she has provided. And then your third part of lectures comes from an interview conducted with Dr. Paul Boyd Batstone, who is amazing, who has an amazing resume, but most notably, he is the current editor of the California Reader. This is just a quick 15-minute video that Dr. Bowers, our former department chair, leads an interview with him. And he talks about his experience getting started writing professionally and what the process is like, and shares experiences as an editor. And I thought it was informational as well as inspirational. Kind of wanted to get going on some professional articles I would like to get published in the next little bit. So great interview. Check it out. Oh my gosh, his publications on anecdotal records are some of my favorites. So he's a huge name in reading and a great resource to listen to. So do listen to that. So that is what's going on for lectures. This is the part 1. Part 2 is the grant writing tutorial. And then part 3 is the interview with the editor of the California Reader. Readings this week. You just have one assigned reading, and it is Secrets of Successful Grant Writing to Support Rural Special Education Programs. And I know you're saying to yourself, I am not a rural special education teacher or program, and that is quite all right. Don't let the name fool you, but in all of my review of many articles for this week, this is the most comprehensive and up-to-date, and I think it's very applicable. They hardly talk about rural special education, so don't let that mislead you. What they do give you is suggestions for developing grant writing skills. They give you a list of 20 books to read about grant writing. They give you a list of other resources for grant writing, as well as a ton of websites. And this is 2014, so it's more recent than some of the other ones I found, so the links are actually likely to work. They also go over the steps to writing a grant, how to develop your proposal, how to prepare and submit it, and what to do after you've submitted it. So please read this, very extensive and informative. I also have 2 optional articles for the week. The first is Successful Grant Writing Strategies. This one is from 2003, but it really I think the information is still relevant, aside from a lot of the website links are no longer active. So don't use it for the web resources, use it for the information in regard to how to write a successful grant. And then there's Strategies for Grant Writing that Turns Plans into Dollars. This is from 2001 and actually doesn't really, it does give you some websites that I'm not sure are still active. You can try, but the information, again, it goes over the components of your grant writing application and gives you tips for each of those. So I thought these 2 were informative at a basic level as far as what a grant consists of and ideas to get you started. And then this one is definitely the best of the bunch. So read that for sure. And here are some optional supporting articles. All right, your participation activity this week is to consider your school site for assignment number 2. So the one that you did the data table for, then a SWOT analysis, then created this wonderful plan for intervention and professional learning. Think about that site. Pretend that you are the literacy specialist and you've been asked by your administrator to research and find a grant and make a proposal for a grant that is aligned to a need you found. So, maybe through all your work, you found that this school is not meeting the needs of English language learners. So as a result, you want to integrate X, Y, and Z. So you want to research a grant then that is targeting second language learners or, might help you with bilingual education or, multicultural pedagogy, things of that nature. So what you're going to do is find a grant and kind of start the grant writing process. Now, initially, I was going to have you complete the full grant proposal. And I think that given where we are in the course right now, that's just you guys are just wrapping up part 3 of assignment 2. I think it's just too much because that really is an extensive process of writing a full grant proposal that takes several weeks. So I don't think I can expect you to do that, in our 1-week unit on grant writing. So instead, we're going to do a condensed version of the same assignment. And basically, you just need to find a grant. What is it? Where is it located? How'd you find it? What could you use this grant for? So specifically, what would it be used for? How would this grant align to the school goals and needs? So a lot of times you find a grant and it's like, oh, this is cool. It's for this gardening project. And it's like, well, that's fine and great. Is that really aligned to what we need to focus on right now, which might be English language learners? No. So maybe we're going to wait on the school-wide garden. Okay. So think about the plan you made for the school in part 3. Find a grant that supports that. And then what could be a sample statement of need for this grant? So in the readings and through the tutorials, you're going to hear about the statement of need. And so I want you to actually craft your statement of need, because once you have one of these done well, you can copy paste it into any grant application. So I do want you to do this part of the grant. Remember to include statistics and test scores because they validate your need. Now, I know normally to get a 5 on your discussion forum participation activity, you need to reference our course readings using APA, and you also need to integrate the comments of a peer. Well, that's not really realistic for this assignment, so don't worry about that this week. All right, assignments due this week. As you should know, by this Tuesday, part 3 of assignment 2 is due. November 7th. Now, because of that assignment being so weighty, I have condensed this grant writing participation activity, but I'm also making it due Sunday, November 12th. So it is my recommendation that you knock out part 3, and I put this in the checklist, get part 3 done. Do not start this new content on a completely different topic until part 3 is done. Once part 3 is done, do your readings, do your tutorial watching for grant writing, and then do your discussion forum, and you have, 4 or 5 extra days there to do that. However, the new week is going to be starting and you're going to have other things to do. So just plan accordingly for that. Okay. All right. As I said, I'm going to have you listen to the experts on grant writing and professional publication, but of course I couldn't just hand you over to them without saying a few things first. So I do have a few slides I wanted to share with you based on my experience writing grants. So our objectives this week are to be able to explain the parts of a grant and the grant writing process, to be able to research grants, locate a potential grant, and begin a grant proposal by crafting a needs statement. So this is what you're doing for our participation activity. That's going to be the measure or the evidence that shows you have mastered our objectives for the week. So my 2 cents on grant writing. Anyone can write a grant. It seems like an overwhelming process. It is a time-consuming process. As a classroom teacher, no, I definitely did not have time to write a grant. As a literacy specialist, I had a little bit more flexibility with my schedule and during my school day. So yes, grant writing was more realistic for me. And so what I would do would research and look for grants, and I made it my goal to apply for a different grant or some funding opportunity. Could be Toys for Tots has a book program that I applied to and got, probably 300 to 500 books that we gave away for Reading Week. So, it doesn't have to necessarily be a full-on grant, but maybe you're just looking for extra funding sources. And so I would try to do something once a month was my personal goal. But as is stated in our assigned reading, grant writing is a craft that anyone can master by developing and practicing specific skills. And really the craft we're talking about is persuasive writing. You need to be able to compel the reader of your grant that you have this significant need. They're the ones to help you. Here's how, their money or resource or whatever they're providing is going to support measurable results at your school with your students. So persuasive writing is all we're talking about here. What you need is an innovative idea, a well thought out plan that aligns to the mission of the organization. So definitely do your research. Read the grant application in its entirety. Get to know who the funder sponsor is, what kind of projects they typically fund. see if you can read about projects they've funded in the past. Sometimes you can get released past applications that are very helpful to model yours after. But, make sure if these are their goals, that your goals align to them. Can you write a lesson plan? Hopefully so. Then you can definitely do this, because a grant contains very similar components. You have your goals for, the program or project you're creating. Then you have your specific objectives that are measurable. From there, you plan activities that are going to support the objectives. And then you plan an assessment of how you're going to know formatively and summatively if you did in fact meet those objectives. So if you can write a lesson plan, you can write a grant. You just got to get a little better at persuasive writing. So real quickly, the architecture of a grant application, and those two supplementary articles go over these really well. But first, you start out with an introduction to your school, and you also describe the school through this and give a little summary of the grant and the proposed project that you're looking to do. So, this is a 1 or 2 paragraph narrative of the school, a brief overview of the project goal, and information about the target audience. Remember, the target audience isn't just the students. Be specific about the number of people that this project will affect. Include parents, include the community at large, that sort of thing. So this is how your grant starts, just with a little introduction to the school and the community and the project and the summary of the grant. Keep this to the point. Keep in mind they're probably reading a ton of applications. So I know in the article you're reading, they talk about maybe even using bullets or, being just, don't overwhelm the reader with too much information. A summary of the grant, it's the first page the reader sees. Keep it short, to the point. They have hundreds of requests coming in, but only have a few readers, so they're trying to get through these pretty quickly. So design your summary with lots of space, use bullets, have no spelling errors, obviously, and you want them to continue reading from the introduction and description summary of the project in your school. So, make it something that they can read easily and are interested to keep reading more. Next comes the statement of need, and this tells the funding agency why the application is important. This is the foundation of the entire proposal. So this lets the agency understand, what is the identified area of need? How did you identify this area of need? Why is this a problem area? And what is going to be done about it? So, you don't want to have your area of need be, we need computers. Okay, maybe you do need computers and that is a need, but what is the bigger need that the computers are going to help your school with? Digital literacy, 21st century, skills and instruction, that kind of thing. So not we need computers, but we need to improve digital literacy skills and teach and prepare our students for 21st century learning, okay? Goals and objectives. So once you identify your need, you move on to goals and objectives. So the goal is a more general statement, whereas the objective is very specific and should match the identified needs. So an objective follows the formula who will do what by when as measured by what instrument. Okay, so think of kind of SMART goals. Each third grader will demonstrate mastery of the multiplication table 0 to 9 by May 2003 as measured by a timed 5-minute test of 100 multiplication facts. So who will do what by when as measured by what instrument, which brings us on to the activities that then support the objectives. So These activities are tied to the objectives. Depending upon the application format, each activity should be described within a timeline. The activities should be in a logical order, clearly identified by person and responsibility, and they should be listed in short phrases and usually begin with a verb. So students will read relevant literature based on science themes, participate in hands-on science experiences, record information in science journals. So basically, what is your implementation plan? What are your activities that are going to be how students actually learn and meet your objectives and goals? Then you have the evaluation of your project. So how will they know that their money went to good use and that the project goals were achieved? So these should be referring directly back to the objectives, and you should have evaluation measures that are both summative and formative. Next, we have the proposed budget, which describes what financial resources are necessary to achieve the project goals. So obviously these are directly related to the program activities. And make sure you include things like taxes for the purchase of supplies and equipment and any additional costs. You don't want to overlook those. So I have a sample I was going to show you. Where is that? Oh, here is this. Here's a grant application I did for some study skills backpacks. So it was for $2,000. So here is how I would break down the $2,000. And then they had the option for an additional $5,000 reward. So here's that additional $5,000 reward and how that would be used. And I know that in one of the articles, they talked to rounding to the nearest dollar amount, which you see I didn't do here, but they talk about being, not rounding to the nearest $10, because things are not going to obviously come out evenly. So having a budget that ends in various dollar amounts gives the reviewer the impression that you've actually priced out all of the items. So make sure you actually price out all of the items and that, these numbers are accurate, because that's going to be what they base the budget off of, or the funds off of. So little sample budget there. Okay, and then lastly, any additional documentation. So there might be supporting letters that you may need, or, a lot of times a resume might be good to include so they see that you are a credible source to give money to, etc. General tips. Do your research. This means you should be reading the guidelines for the grant in their entirety, not only paying attention to things like page limits, formatting, all of those kinds of things, because it would be a shame for your grant application to get thrown out because you didn't adhere to, limitations they've set forward there. I know you don't want to be, submitting your grant in a fancy font or on colored paper, or things that just make it look unprofessional. But then also make sure you're reading the guidelines of the grant to make sure that the curricular topics and priorities of the grant make sense for your school. So a lot of times a grant will target a specific demographic, American Indians, or all female schools. So obviously, if that doesn't apply to your school, that's not going to be a good grant for you. So make sure you pay attention to the demographic they're looking to target with their grant, or the curricular topic. Allow yourself at least 2.5 weeks to pull it together. I recommend making a grant application schedule. So usually over summer, beginning of the school year, I'd make a list of all the different grant applications I wanted to apply to that year and when the deadline is. So this is an education grant due April 30th. I wanted our science teacher to apply for. Here's outstanding young educator due August 1st, company grant October 3rd. And then all of these are ongoing rolling deadlines. And then any notes about the grant. Didn't do that one actually. This one you need to apply 8 weeks in advance, etc. You'll notice that I relied on grantwrangler.com to research all of my grants, which that website does not exist anymore, which is so upsetting because I was on there constantly finding great kind of more the local level grants. And that's another thing they recommend in the article is to start small. Don't start with a big federal level grant, but start with some of these smaller ones. The Dryers $3,000 grant, or here's a Digital Wish tech grant. First National Bank has a grant for books. So that was a grant scheduling thing that I created. Here's another one I did. Different grants I found. Here, Toys for Tots, I did that one. I also did this Barbara Bush Foundation. I did that one. So yeah, make a list of the grants and their deadlines. So, if it's something that's due more than 2.5, 3 weeks out, save it for, jot it down with the link and save it for next time. Okay. Remember, you may be able to copy paste from other grant applications, especially with the introduction and description of the school. So, once you craft some of these pieces of the grant, it's very easy to just make minor tweaks, copy paste from one grant application to the next. And the reason why I wanted this unit to piggyback off of part 3 of assignment 2 is because you've done a lot of crafting of statements about the school, what the demographic is like, what the assessment results are showing, and what the needs of the school are. Begin with a specific need in mind, develop a strong and compelling need statement. I'll show you a sample next. A catchy name helps your application stand out. Make sure to triple proofread, even have someone else unfamiliar with the grant read it to make sure it makes sense. And then after you submit, send a thank you to the grant review committee. If you don't get the grant, ask them for feedback to find out, what you could have done to improve your grant. So here is a sample needs statement that I created that I used over and over and over again. At Aspire Titan Academy, we believe that college is for certain for all of our students. Typically, minority students from low-income communities don't graduate from college, but we have made it our mission to see that our students do. 96% of Titan students qualify for free and reduced lunch, and 99% are Hispanic, Mexican, and Latino. So there's that demographic data we pulled for part 1. We are located in Huntington Park, a city in Los Angeles County, just 3 square miles. According to the United States Bureau of the Census, there are 61,348 people living within that radius. So more demographic data I'm pulling in. Our students are not afforded many luxuries and have limited access to books. This grant would fund a home literacy program titled Leamos Juntos, so read together. So making sure to include the name of the project program and using it over and over again, where students would bring home a few books a week to enjoy with their families. And basically, this continues to describe the project there. So, once you get one of these crafted and you have a lot of this data and information at your fingertips now from having just done that big assignment on this school, it's easy to find. All right, in wrapping up, I want to show you a few different websites. Here's the California Department of Ed site for available funding. I don't know what it's doing. Wanted to show you here at the top, you can send a blank email to this address to join the electronic funding mailing list. So I would definitely do that. Here is federal grant website. Normally, I always recommend Grant Wrangler, but it's not an option anymore, which is so upsetting. But I would look in your article for the week on page 31 or page 3 and page 4. They have a lot of websites listed. Ugh. Also wanted to make you aware of other unique funding options I've used in the past. Donors Choose, I was able to get, as the literacy specialist, 3 LCD projectors funded and 4 document cameras funded. So Donors Choose is a great way to do that. When I was a classroom teacher teaching second grade, I wanted to take my students from East LA to my alma mater, UC San Diego, for a fun field trip. But I needed to fund that entirely on my own since, asking student families to contribute for the bus and everything was not an option. So I took up a PayPal collection and posted that on Facebook, social media, different things like that, and actually raised $10,000 for that field trip, which was awesome. Every student got a disposable camera. We developed their pictures. They used them to make a published book about the experience. It was awesome. And then lastly, your school's probably already doing these, but we had a lot of restaurant nights that I set up as the literacy specialist. Shakey's was nearby. I can't remember what percentage they gave us, but it was a lot, and we always made a ton of money. Families would come out with their kids. The teachers were there, could interact. It was always really fun. Social event for the school, and then a great way to get some additional funding. So, there's other funding options out there, not just grant writing. But, once you get started grant writing and do that first one, it's easy to go from one to the next. My PowerPoint is not advancing. All right, there we go. Hopefully, between this screencast and the others that you will do independently with your reading, you will better understand the grant writing process. You're going to get started researching grants and even crafting your needs statement. So to launch you, here's a quote from our assigned reading. Many educators are intimidated by the grant writing process, but if you, oh my goodness, typo there, sorry about that. But if you believe in yourself, if you believe in yourself and your ability to write a winning grant proposal, you will succeed, ... And they talk about, if not the first time, maybe one of your attempts after. And yes, you may get rejected for your first grant proposal. That's okay. Get some feedback, see what you need to do better, and improve upon it for the next one. And just keep submitting grant applications until you get something. I promise you will. There's many sources out there. You just have to get creative. So good luck to you. I look forward to seeing what you come up with for your grants this week. Have a great week.